The morning sky over downtown Chicago shimmered with light rain, the kind that made everything, the glass towers, the passing cars, the sidewalks, gleam like silver. Inside the lobby of Wellington and Pierce Financial, the air smelled of espresso and polished marble. Employees rushed in through revolving doors, clutching coffee cups and checking their watches. At the front desk, Carla Jennings, the receptionist, was on her third cup of coffee and fifth good morning of the day. She prided herself on being alert, the kind of gatekeeper who could spot who belonged and who didn't in a heartbeat. So when the elevator doors opened and Danielle King stepped out, Carla's practiced smile faltered. Danielle was tall, elegant, and composed, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit her like it was made for her, because it was. Her natural curls framed her face perfectly, and she carried a slim leather briefcase in one hand. There was no name badge on her coat, no visible ID, but there was confidence in the way she moved, calm and unhurried. Carla looked up and frowned slightly. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said as Danielle approached the desk. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Danielle said, her voice smooth and professional. "I'm here for a meeting on the top floor." Carla's brows pinched. "The top floor?" she repeated. "That's the executive level. Are you sure you're in the right building?" Danielle blinked, caught off guard for a moment. Not by the question, but by the tone. She'd heard it before. The subtle disbelief, the polite challenge, the assumption that she didn't belong here. She smiled faintly. "Yes, I'm sure." Carla tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "Who exactly are you here to see?" Danielle paused, her hand resting on the briefcase handle. "I have a 9 a.m. meeting," she said simply. "My name is Danielle King." Carla typed the name into her computer with quick, practiced fingers. Nothing came up in the visitor system. Her expression hardened with smug satisfaction. "I don't see your name here, Ms. King. Maybe you're supposed to be in the building across the street. That's the accounting offices." Danielle's eyes flicked toward the elevators, then back to Carla. Her tone stayed calm. "No, this is the right address." The receptionist folded her arms. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but the top floor is restricted access, executives only. If you're here for an interview or a delivery, you'll need to check in with HR on level 3. The words landed sharp and cold. Danielle didn't flinch. She'd been underestimated before, dismissed before, told to wait her turn more times than she could count. But this moment still stung, not because of what was said, but because of how familiar it felt. She gave a small, patient smile. "Thank you," she said, "but I'll be fine." At that moment, the elevator doors opened again. A tall man in a gray suit stepped out, Richard Lawson, the company's outgoing CEO. He spotted Danielle immediately, his face lighting up with recognition. "Danielle," he said warmly, crossing the lobby, "you made it. Welcome back." Carla froze. Danielle turned slightly, her posture as poised as ever. "Good morning, Richard. It's good to see you." He shook her hand firmly. "We're all set upstairs. The board's been waiting to greet you." Carla's mouth went dry. "The board?" she stammered. Richard nodded, smiling proudly. "Yes. Didn't you hear? Danielle's taking over as our new CEO starting today." The silence that followed was deafening. Carla's face drained of color. Her hands hovered uselessly over the keyboard. "Oh, I didn't realize—" Danielle looked at her, eyes steady. Not angry, not smug, just knowing. "It's all right," she said softly. "I understand. Sometimes it takes people a moment to adjust." Richard gestured toward the elevator. "Shall we?" Danielle gave one last polite nod to Carla before stepping inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The elevator doors closed with a quiet chime, leaving the receptionist alone with her reflection in the glossy surface. A reflection that now looked uncertain, uncomfortable, and small. Upstairs, as the elevator ascended, Danielle allowed herself a single private breath. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about responsibility, about all the doors she'd had to push open to get here, and all the people she'd hold the door open for next. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, the skyline stretched before her, vast, limitless, and hers. The top floor of Wellington and Pierce Financial was a world apart from the bustling lobby below. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline, sunlight spilling across glass conference tables and polished steel. The air carried the faint hum of money and power, and the quiet unease of people who weren't sure how to react to change. When Danielle King stepped out of the elevator, the board members were already gathered in the executive lounge, chatting in low tones. Conversations slowed when they saw her. Richard Lawson, the outgoing CEO, smiled broadly and gestured toward her. Everyone, meet your new chief executive officer. The introductions were polite but restrained, firm handshakes, practiced smiles, the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. Danielle had spent years reading people in boardrooms. She knew exactly what those smiles meant. She's smart. But is she ready? Is she one of us? She'd heard it all before, sometimes whispered, sometimes not. But today, none of that mattered. She wasn't here to prove herself. She was here to lead. After the formalities, Richard gave a short farewell speech, praising her intelligence, leadership, and fresh perspective. Then it was Danielle's turn to speak. She stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the cool glass surface, and took a moment before beginning. I've spent most of my career in rooms where people didn't expect to see me, she said evenly. And that's taught me two things. First, that perception is powerful. And second, that it's often wrong. A few people shifted in their seats, she continued, her tone calm but sharp with intent. This company was built on numbers, profit margins, growth metrics, forecasts. But I think it's time we remember the people behind those numbers. The analysts, the assistants, the receptionists, the clients who trust us with their futures. If we can't see their value, we'll never see our own potential. The room fell silent. The words hung there, elegant, precise, impossible to dismiss. Danielle smiled faintly. Now, I'm not here to change everything overnight, but I am here to make sure every person who walks through that lobby knows they belong here, whether they're wearing a tailored suit or carrying a clipboard. There was quiet applause, hesitant at first, then genuine. Richard clapped the loudest. After the meeting, Danielle moved into her new office, spacious, minimal, with a view that stretched all the way to Lake Michigan. She placed one framed photo on her desk. Her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, smiling in front of a small grocery store in the South Side. The caption on the frame read, "Never forget where you come from." As she unpacked, there was a knock at the door. It was Carla, the receptionist from earlier. She stood nervously in the doorway, clutching a clipboard. Ms. CEO, she said awkwardly, forcing a smile. I just wanted to bring your access badge and parking permit. And also, I wanted to apologize for this morning. Danielle looked up, her expression unreadable. You don't need to apologize for doing your job, Carla. Carla's cheeks flushed. I wasn't doing it right. I made an assumption. I thought... She stopped herself, unable to find a word that didn't sound worse than silence. I'm really sorry. Danielle studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Apology accepted. But let me tell you something, Carla. The next time someone walks in and doesn't look like who you expect, try this. Instead of assuming, ask how you can help. Carla nodded quickly. I will, I promise. Good, Danielle said. Her tone wasn't cold. It was steady, the tone of someone who'd lived the lesson she was teaching. Because this building represents all of us, and that means everyone deserves a fair welcome. Carla's eyes softened. Thank you. Really? Danielle smiled faintly. You're welcome. Now, make sure you get yourself a new badge, too. You just became the first face of this company's change. Carla blinked, surprised. Me? Yes, you, Danielle said. That front desk is the first place our clients see. Let's make sure it reflects the respect we stand for. Carla nodded, still a little stunned. Yes, ma'am, I'll do better. As she left, Danielle turned back toward the window. The rain had stopped, and the city glimmered beneath a pale winter sun. She exhaled slowly, the weight of old battles lifting, replaced by something lighter. The work ahead would be hard. There would be doubters, whispers, the same subtle tests she'd always faced. But for the first time, she felt a rare kind of peace. Because now, when someone told her she didn't belong, she could simply smile and look around her office, her company, her skyline, and know she'd built her own place in the world. 3 weeks into her new role as CEO, Danielle King had already begun reshaping Wellington and Pierce Financial, not with loud changes or flashy press releases, but with precision. She held listening sessions with department heads, created mentorship programs, and reviewed internal diversity reports that hadn't been updated in years. Her approach was deliberate, methodical, and to some, uncomfortable. That was especially true for William Hargrove, the company's chief operating officer. William was old school, silver hair, expensive suits, and the unshakable confidence of a man who had never been questioned in a boardroom. He'd been at Wellington and Pierce for over 30 years and had quietly expected his name to be announced when Richard Lawson retired. Instead, a woman half his age, and black, now sat in the chair he'd been circling for decades. He didn't hide his resentment well, so when Danielle called a senior leadership meeting to review spending priorities, William came prepared, not with data, but with condescension. The meeting took place in the executive conference room, a long, glass-walled space overlooking the city. Danielle sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, reviewing her notes. Around her, the team buzzed with low chatter until she spoke. "Good morning, everyone," she said. "Let's get started. I've reviewed our Q1 projections, and we're reallocating a portion of discretionary funds to employee development and community engagement programs." William leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly. "Community engagement?" he repeated. "Forgive me, but that sounds like a public relations gesture, not a business investment." Danielle looked up, expression still. "I disagree. When we invest in people, productivity follows. Morale, retention, performance, they're all connected. The numbers support it." William chuckled softly, glancing at others around the table. "With all due respect, Danielle, this company was built on discipline and profitability, not social experiments. We're bankers, not activists." The air went tense. A few people looked down at their papers. Danielle didn't flinch. She closed her folder gently and folded her hands on the table. "William," she said, her voice calm but cutting, "do you remember what our company mission statement is?" He blinked. "Of course. Integrity, trust, growth." "Exactly," she said. "Integrity means doing what's right. Trust means earning it. And growth doesn't just mean profits. It means people. If we ignore that, we stop being who we say we are." He gave a stiff smile. "That's a nice speech. But let's be practical." Danielle's eyes sharpened. "Practical is ensuring our employees feel valued enough to stay. Practical is attracting clients who see themselves reflected in our leadership. Practical is making sure the receptionist downstairs doesn't treat a potential investor like they're in the wrong building." A ripple went through the room, quiet but undeniable. William's smirk faded. Danielle continued, her tone steady but fierce. "This isn't about politics. It's about respect, about recognizing that leadership looks different now, and that's a good thing." Silence followed. Then, to everyone's surprise, Lydia Chen, the firm's chief legal officer, spoke up. "I agree with Danielle," she said firmly. "Retention's down 10%. Morale's slipping. We need this shift." A few more nods followed, tentative at first, then more confident. The balance in the room had shifted. William sat back, eyes narrowing slightly, realizing he'd lost this round. Danielle looked around the table. "Then it's settled. The budget reallocation stands. Let's move forward, together." The meeting wrapped. Executives filed out, some murmuring quiet congratulations. William lingered, then approached her as the room emptied. "You're playing the long game, aren't you?" he said, his tone somewhere between grudging respect and lingering disbelief. Danielle met his eyes. "No," she said simply. "I'm playing the right one." He studied her for a moment, then gave a curt nod and left. When the door closed, Danielle exhaled softly, turning toward the window. Chicago stretched wide before her, a city built on hustle, reinvention, resilience, the same traits she'd spent her whole life mastering. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. It was Carla, holding a stack of reports. "I brought the updated visitor logs you asked for," she said, smiling shyly. "Oh, and the new signage downstairs? It now says, 'Welcome to Wellington and Pierce, where everyone belongs.'" Danielle looked up, pleasantly surprised. That was your idea? Carla nodded proudly. Thought it fit the new direction. Danielle smiled. It does. Perfectly. Carla hesitated. You really are changing this place. Danielle looked at her, warmth in her eyes. Not me, she said. We are. Carla smiled, nodded, and left. Danielle turned back to the skyline. For years, she'd fought to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized not as an exception, but as the example. And now, as sunlight poured across her desk, she knew she'd earned every inch of this space. Not through privilege, not through chance, but through purpose. And that purpose was just beginning.